Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Guriarjo. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, or morning if you're in Vancouver, or evening if you're in the UK. So anyway, I think you know the drill. Our profiles are on mondaylive.org. The most important part here is that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. I think we all know how to use the Zoom tools, and also this deck and everything that's in it is on mondaylive.org as well. So the topic of this month of August is using the Smarter Stack. We had our first session last week, which was, let's say, insightful. We'll come back to that in a minute. So the agenda for today is same as normal, news and trends, just chit chat, and then just continuing to classify as lesson 2 or continuation of how we're going to use the Smarter Stack. But before we get to that, Ken, what do you have on your mind?
Okay, we've got our August issue up. We followed your theme, delivering smarter buildings. It's gone reasonably well for us. I've just written a next chapter for Connected Contractor. We've called that Smarter Buildings Decarbonize, making the next leap. What are we going to do with these smarter buildings and falling on us or trying to be controlled, I guess, is carbon in our world. We're seeing all kinds of results of global warming, fires, and all kinds of things that have got it high on our minds. So the decarbonation is a theme. I think the smarter building is naturally going to play into that. I think if you can't rationalize or normalize the decarbonization in your sales pitch, I think that's a particular problem because it's on everybody's mind. This whole process of delivering smarter buildings is a challenge, and I think the stack is a great tool to make these complex systems. Let us evaluate them. On our September issue, we're going to be smarter buildings evolving to decarbonization and electrification era, and a new view of our industry. Actually, I missed last Monday Live. Did a walk with the kids, as I call them. The kids, by the way, are 50 and looking at retiring and have been in the business for 17 years as well, my kids. So it's not like they're real kids, but their businesses just completely changed in the last year or so. Coming out of COVID, all of their projects are involved with decarbonization and the electrification, which is different than saving energy. It has a deeper and even a different audience of who is driving the process. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing is I kind of trying to figure out what it is I've been doing for the last 22 years, which is always a good exercise for everybody. And I kind of came to the conclusion that what I am actually a curator of change. That's all I really do, is I kind of see things happening and then I attempt to write about them, link to them, and try and make sense of them. I'm not sure that I do a good job of that, but that's what I try and do. And definitely carbon is the latest change. So on that, I'll pass on to the next.
Hey, I'm late. I apologize. Kenny, let me just say, you do a great job at it. You're a model for me for keeping the mind pliable and flexible well into some old age, man.
So can I get on the phone to the folks at Marvel and say that you, the curator of change, will become the next superhero in their saga of superheroes?
Hey.
The curator of change, or is it a World Wrestling Federation thing? We'll put you in the ring, slam you.
All right, let's move on now. Let's move on. So Mark, back to you then.
So a couple articles that really caught my mind over the weekend and today. The first one is we're now starting to see the companies are changing their plans for coming back to the office. I think we spoke about early on when we started Monday Live. We were predicting when, and we said maybe the fall or whatever. That's now changing. The companies are scrapping them, and so now the talk is after the first of the year. And in fact, Amazon announced today that they are not having folks return to the office per se until after the first of the year. And another large financial institution also is about to announce the same. So I'm sure we'll see some more. But one that really just kind of really caught me by surprise, well, not surprise, is Iran's secret files. And this has to do with cybersecurity. And somebody's obtained and published these secret files from Iran and talk about classified documents, but importantly is talking about hacking and getting into systems. And they call out building control systems specifically, in addition to others. But the fact that this is being, in something like this and building control systems. So again, I think it's nothing new that we've all talked about security and the importance of it for our systems. But I think this is just more evident proof that, it's very important and vital to, take security very seriously here. And in fact, if you go to it, unfortunately, they actually mention a few manufacturers by name that they were targeting. So that's what I have for today.
If you remember, Mark, going back, the whole security hacking thing started with the CIA breaking into Iran-Iraq's
Strutnex, whatever it was called.
Stuxnet.
that was a Siemens S5 thing, and I think it kind of moved on from that too.
Yeah. So
Writing.
I'll pass it back to you, Anto.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it back to Anno.
Oh, cool. Interesting report from Gartner. Sorry. Gartner.
You sound like you're from Massachusetts.
Gartner, yeah. If you get a chance, have a look at it. There are sustainability ambitions and stuff. Key findings you can read there. Kind of fascinated by Gartner's take on the ecosystem with the technology ecosystem components. A lot of the things that we've been talking about for the last how long we've been going. AI, ML, IoT, digital twins, data and analytics and stuff. So, the fact that Gartner's starting to pick up on this verbiage is interesting.
And what is the big takeaway? That spending is increasing. I see that there.
Yes, in fact, I didn't. There's a lot of interesting graphs on it. There's a huge uptick on the two big takeaways I had was a huge uptick on sustainability initiatives and the trends as to why they're doing that. What's the trend for doing that? And they tracked it back to 2015, I guess, is when they started. But yeah, big uptick and various different reasons coming down why. But get a chance, have a read of the report. A lot of good graphs.
Okay. Great, thank you. So next will be me. I got quite depressed when I saw this. I think we all know this is kind of coming and this is actually happening. But obviously the fires basically around the world is extremely worrying, and this is no longer an annual, well, it's no longer an occasional occurrence. This is something that happens, it seems, every year. And it ain't gonna stop.
Anto, it's been going on for as long as there's been the planet. There's nothing new about fires. In fact, the prevalence of fires today is less than it was in the 1930s. So yes, we talk about it all the time. We give lots of attention to it, but the extent of it, the amount of acreage is being burned is no more today than it was 50 years ago. In fact, it's less. So I appreciate the concern that is affecting people's lives, but the reality is fires have been going on our planet, and particularly in the US, forever. So it's nothing new.
Steve, were you triggered?
I was definitely triggered. I have a real problem with all this climate crap because everybody has a problem with the truth. Nobody wants to talk about the truth. They only want to talk about their thing that, oh my God, we got to decarbonize the planet when carbon is actually contributing to the greening of the planet. And they don't want to talk about the increased productivity of our agriculture as a result of adding carbon to the atmosphere. It's a good thing, not a terrible thing. And for the last 20 years, the planet has not been warming. It's been the same temperature. So yet we keep hearing about all this, the fact the models are all, not a single meteorological model is accurate, not one. Look at the facts, don't look at the nonsense. And I agree that from a business standpoint, everybody's selling on the basis of decarbonization, but don't confuse that for the truth, boys and girls. It's not a real problem, it's a perceived problem. Thank you. I'm getting off my horse now. And get back
Anto, I got to give you credit. I want to congratulate you, Anto, for putting together such a diverse group of people for Monday Live.
Thank you, Bill. I knew this, my slide would cause some conversation, but anyway. Any more thoughts on this before we move on?
I just had, there's an interesting thing. McKinsey actually did a report on just saying how many people could work from home now and might likely be, and the fact that it'll change urbanization and everything else. All those things will be considered. But one of the things he threw up in the press today was that whether people, if people work from home, it should be considered they should take a pay cut because they're not traveling, they're not spending, especially if they're working out of cities like London or New York or something where they've not got that additional, what they call London waiting, which is for the travel. The cost of your house is more because you're local to London and you could move out and, eating in town and stuff. So interesting side issue there. Whether people would be prepared to take a pay cut to stay at home for 3 days a week might be a challenge.
Well, I think I brought a few weeks ago, I brought something up about that when I was looking at when people staying at home, what that was going to, they could look for things like, oh, well, you're not going to get promoted because you're not you're not there, you're not part of the team, you won't be seen. So those are some of the things. And they had called for that and said, yeah, people, they're going to look to people that work from home aren't going to make as much. I never really thought that your compensation was based on, whether or not you had to drive and sit in traffic for an hour or gas. I always thought it was based on what contribution you brought to the company, regardless of where you were.
But there definitely is in the UK, for instance, if you work in London, you get something called London waiting because it is more expensive, to travel. You've got to travel in further. You've got to pay more money for your food in restaurants and stuff like that. So they actually, even the government bodies actually pay more for people working in London. But if you're not there, should you get it taken away?
I guess I get that point. Even in the US, it's always been a different pay scale based on, the location of where you are.
Yeah.
So, that's always been
Good point.
Been the thing. So I wouldn't think that would change much here because when you interview for something, they always ask, they always know where you are located.
Yep.
Okay, let us move on. Topic of this month and this week is using the Smarter Stack. This is the link, incidentally, if you need to find the Smarter Stack. And first, before we actually have a guest, we're going to bring in Brian Turner, who's going to share with us his view about using the Smarter Stack for what he's doing. But before that, we had an interesting session last week. This is what we ended up with. And I know last week it ended up on 2 slides, but I compacted it all into 1 slide. And we actually discussed this later last week and sort of wanted to sort of point out some of the things that we've learned from doing this. First of all, is that the way to use this stack is really from a certain perspective. And I think it's important to sort of say that on the slide. So what we're proposing is that we do this. We do something like last week was actually the Monday Live group : this is what the companies do. This is what our companies do collectively. All right. And so this is essentially the context is from this group, and this is the perspective that we're trying to communicate with this stack. So that matters. Context matters, and what you're talking about matters. So it's important to have that too, and put it on the title. The second thing is, what are these things here? These are really sort of, this is a business stack. This is more of a business stack. I know there are lots of stacks that are technology stacks and very sort of specific. And these are really to do with the values of the different activities that's necessary for smarter buildings or smart buildings to be delivered to owners, right? So the different values and the different sort of things that needs to happen are sort of divided between these layers, which is our sort of way of thinking about it. So so with each of these words, you can imply whatever you want to imply in terms of what, for example, data means in your context, if you're doing one of these, right? So you can sort of interpret this in the manner that best suits how what you're trying to do to communicate what you're doing with the stack, right? So that's important. The other thing is that several of the audience and we noticed that last week we had a layer that was blank. In fact, we had two layers that's blank. There's this one, the pink layer at the top, and then the physical layer at the bottom. And sort of thinking about it, this is not really very surprising because there aren't really any of us in the Monday Live group, the core group, that actually does anything in this operational space. Now, you could argue that we are trying to address people. Those are some of our customers, so maybe that's something that we need to sort of fix. But that's that obviously just sort of identifies a hole in our thinking in this group. Similar, obviously, with the lower, but with the physical layer. But that's a little bit more understandable because we kind of know that we don't get involved with concrete and steel and the sort of the physical stuff. But this was kind of interesting for us because this is obviously a gap in our conversation. So that's that part. The other thing is what these words are that we put in on the stack. And you know, are they companies, are they products, are they technologies, or are they individuals, or you know, what should be there? And again, it's the same as the titles on the left. It really depends on whatever it is that you're trying to do, given the context, the perspective that you're trying to communicate. So it really, you can put whatever that makes sense on these boxes or on the stack, as long as it communicates your intent of whatever it is that you're trying to do to describe in the stack. And one such example, Tracy, I don't see Tracy on the call today, but Tracy actually did one with us. And this sort of shows an example of sort of, let's say, a well-formed stack. It comes from Tracy and it's his perspective on the product that he calls eView IoT Retail from his company. And so this is the perspective and this is what he's trying to do. And then the outcomes are, as you see it here, sort of it makes sense in terms of what business outcomes that the solution is trying to address. The operations are the people and on site, and they deliver different types of deliveries, both technical in terms of something like a web server and mobile, as well as installers. So this is this is obviously an organization, and these are technologies. And so it goes down all the way down to the physical, describing what physical buildings that he's addressing. So, you know, this is a sort of a nicely formed stack. That sort of, in a way, it gives us sort of a description of what this product is all about. So before we move on to bringing Brian in, I'd like to spend a bit of time with the group just discussing either this or the previous slide or any other comments about what we've learned in the experience that we've had. Thoughts, anyone?
So we talked a little bit about this, Anto, on Wednesday, the importance of the definitions for all of the words on the left column, the leftmost column. So taking delivery as an example, you pointed out that delivery can both be the channel organizations that are responsible for, for installing the technology as an example. So in the case of Tracy, we see in the second column from the left, it says installers, okay? But then in the fourth column from the left, he's got mobile and web, which implies technology. So the question is, I don't recall exactly what the definition for delivery was, but if it doesn't specifically call out that it can be either or helps somebody define it, it's going to lead to a certain level of confusion. So if we wanted everybody to use delivery in the sense of just channel organizations, then putting technology in there would get confusing. So that's my one concern here, is that we're mixing two completely different things, a business aspect of delivery versus a technology aspect. Do we want to do that? Is my question to the group. Question as well as to the audience, right?
I'm with you, Steve. I would have thrown mobile and web servers under apps or Exchange or down in the technology perspective. But the other thought to remember when we built this was that you could have a different slide deck for the different categories, right? So you could actually come up with a category which is just focused on the people and the resources and that sort of thing, which you could actually say in the Exchange and in the data, what sort of people are using the data, what sort of people are using Exchange. So in my mind, I always thought I could have a slide which shows, these are the different people that get involved in each of those sections. And then another slide which talks about the technology that's involved in each of them. So, but I agree with you, mixing the two together on one slide is confusing.
And that could be a good use of the title at the top. So this could be, you could have two versions of this, one that says EV or IoT technology and the other one to do with, let's say, partners or route to market.
Yeah, go to market strategy, sales strategy, anything.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's important that we outline who the audience is. And that's probably a good place to do it, right at the things. We should have said that this is for, remote store owners or something like that. Everyone thought he had in his head when he created his stack. I think that needs to be identified as well as the product. So he identified the product he was talking about, but at what purpose? What was he trying to do with this product? He was trying to explain it to a restaurant owner. I think that needs to, as explained to a restaurant owner or something, might be useful.
But is delivery really deployment?
Well, the genesis of the word delivery was the delivery of the smarts to the users. That was kind of where the word came out. And what the other sort of angle that we talked about on Wednesday is that one of the reasons of this stack is to communicate the disruption that's happening, right? Or the change that's happening, as per Ken, sort of curator of change. And I was trying to sort of think about what if we were trying to create a stack for movies, right? So up on the outcomes, you'd have happiness, joy, drama, blah blah blah. Those are kind of the outcomes you want from going to see a movie. And delivery could be AMC and Cinemark, or it could be Blockbuster, or it could be Netflix, or it could be Prime, right? So that's how I get a movie. Right, it really doesn't matter, and disruption changes that, and that's one of the. I think you're right, Steve, that we have to be careful when we're mixing. But sometimes mixing is exactly the point that we're trying to communicate: is that there are different things that's happening as we sort of change the industry into a different realm. Anybody buy that?
Yeah, but just to talk for Steve, because I know he can speak for himself. But my view, Anto, is I think I think it can accomplish that by having two different charts. Trying to mix them up is, I think, would be confusing. But it comes back to however you want to use it, right? I guess people are going to abuse whatever standards you put in place.
Exactly.
I think when I look at the way you're using the delivery with technology, I wish there was a better, an alternative word we could have for delivery, because I really see the reason for it, Anto. So if you're posting software or you're using wide area network, or some kind of communications infrastructure to get the service out there, that is a form of delivery. It's what you can think of as just not the best word. When I look at smarts, I'm thinking technology. I'm not thinking people at all. I'm just thinking technology. And when I look at the word delivery, my immediate reaction are the people. Is it a systems integrator who's putting this in? Am I selling it directly to the owner and they're installing it themselves? How is it getting into the marketplace from a business perspective? Okay, and combining that, it seems to me that one word is trying to serve two masters, which is why we're having this conversation. And you could almost make the stack a little bit taller and have the word delivery be associated with the channel, how it gets to market. That's its only purpose. And then another word for delivery that has to do with technology, hosting.
Yeah. Would deployment or deploy?
That's what I was going to suggest. Instead of delivery for the installers or whatever, call that deployment, and then delivery refers to the technology.
Well, I was actually suggesting that deployment be a replacement for delivery as one layer.
I think I'm in Steve's camp. I think the two they have to be separate, but I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we can obviously experiment with the two-slide approach and see if that clarifies things, and maybe there are other ways of actually distinguishing. I sort of thought about having different color boxes for people versus companies versus technology, but that gets really, really complicated very quickly.
But are the people bits really smarts? Mobile web and web servers are smarts, but are installers and training education part of the smarts?
I think that's a good question, Roger, because that's part of the this Coalition for Smart Buildings. One of our missions is, I think one of the downfalls that we've got is we're not really bringing engineers and new people into the space as far as smart technologies are concerned, right? That's one of our challenges, and so I could argue that, the way to deliver, Tracy's technology here requires, smarter, higher level engineers, technicians, than say the guys who used to put in pneumatic thermostats, for argument's sakes, right?
Any other thoughts before we bring Brian in?
Brian rapidly changing his slides whilst we talk.
Okay, so I'm going to bring him on then, so he doesn't do that anymore. Hey, Brian, I'm bringing you on. Hope you're ready for us. There you go. I'm going to stop my share. Hey, Brian.
Hello, how are you guys?
Brian, good, thanks.
Hey, Brian.
Good.
See, you guys are trying to keep us confused as usual. It's great.
Well,
Are we doing a good job?
We're trying to develop something collaboratively with all of us. So
Yeah.
So you're sharing your stack. Go ahead.
So I'm going to jump right in, and because we only got about 25 minutes or so. So I didn't have the benefit of that conversation over the last 10 minutes. So these are the definitions I used. And then, of course, I'm going to blow it all up anyway. So that's probably why you asked me to come on. By the way, this isn't something I put, hours and hours of thought into. Anto asked me if I could do this Friday afternoon. I had a busy weekend, didn't get to this till this morning, and I had a busy morning. But the good thing is a lot of this is how we look at our business anyway. And so it was really just taking things that we know about our business, that I know about our business, and trying to apply it as best as possible to this stack. So I am of the kind of mindset that a stack has to be filled. Even if I don't do it, I need to identify that somebody does it. And so that's the dotted line stuff here. And I've broken this out kind of two different ways. So the stack, each column is a stack of a deliverable. So in this case, this is how we see things done today. BMS does all this stuff. I think you guys already laid kind of this one out in a prior meeting. The next one is really around ontology and applying the ontology so that you can get to that digital twin. Again, it's really there. It's not a deliverable per se. Not very many people ask me just to apply an ontology, although I do have a couple customers that's all they want me to do, or validate the ontology is correct. It's when we get into these last two columns is really where we in our business kind of changes the dynamic of what an end user or whatever the customer happens to be. As you'll see, the end user is not always our customer. So in the third column over, we take all the different systems, because now it's much more than just control systems. It's also monitoring systems. It's cloud data. It's lots of different things. We bring that in. We happen to use Folio under the hood. We also use MongoDB for a lot of the relationships that are kind of outside of Folio, especially if we're relating physical property and physical premise to other cloud technologies that may or may not be inside of Folio. As you know, a lot of these platforms have their own analytics, and there's not always value to bring it back into Folio as well. So, but there's still value to relate everything. And so that's usually what we use Mongo for. IoT Jetstream is our product, and we use that for the data exchange. That's also where our digital twin is really brought together. And then we also have, at that point, a domain-specific API. And then apps, again, we are Folio, so SkySpark is an app, Altair is a GraphQL tool that can be used to interrogate how we deliver directly through OEMs and through channel partners. Again, the operations side is typically left up to some FM or the building owner themselves or some other third party. And then the outcome is that they have a lot of different disparate sources of data, whether they're on-prem or cloud, integrated into a digital twin. And then there's a domain-specific API in the output. And then there's also some ESG type functionality. We're a big believer that ESG is going to start to drive valuations of properties and either enhance evaluation or degrade from. Don't need to get into a climate change discussion anymore, but I think ESG has a strong movement in the business sense of valuation of buildings. And as that becomes more and more prevalent, you're going to have to be able to prove that your ESG reporting is actually accurate. You have to prove that with data. It's not going to be, and it's not going to be acceptable in my view to only be annual or even quarterly. It's going to have to be real time, on demand, with everything that can be. So that's a big aspect there. And then when you take it to kind of the next layer over, we go and now we have a same thing on the bottom side, and then we move up into OnPoint, which is our visualization, analytics, user experience. We also started integrating other business applications with partners like BuiltSpace or Corrigo or different things from a workflow and work order management perspective. Again, we either go direct or through OEM or through channel partners. When we get to operations, this is where we start to change the game a little bit and start to play in that area where we do augment the customer operations. So we might be working with an FM, we might be working with an end user directly, and we're helping them really analyze the building, the operations, We're helping them dispatch. We're helping them choose which things are most effective to go work on today, right now, and then of course supporting their operations on an ongoing basis. And then the outcomes: single pane of glass, enterprise command and control, healthy buildings, predictive and prescriptive maintenance, rules-based automation, energy efficiency, and again, the ESG. So I know these are a bunch of acronyms, but trying to put all of that in that little box would have been a very small font.
Good.
So that's really how I did this layer. Before I get too many comments, I want to just go through the next 2 slides because I'm curious. I think I applied this pretty much per the definitions. Unless any of you think that I missed a definition here, I feel like this is pretty spot on. Okay.
Looks right.
All right.
Well,
So-
well, the point is that this is your view, this is your perspective,
Right.
Brian. So we can't say it's wrong. We may disagree.
Well,
That's
no,
fine.
definitions specifically is more
The
and more.
definition, yeah.
Yeah, making sure that you guys were having that conversation about delivery. I think I took that from last, because you had the same discussion last meeting around what delivery meant. So I wanted to be consistent there. The one thing here that's different is this cloud services, because this is more the ontology. So we have this ontology alignment project where we normalize Haystack and DBO and Brick. And so you have one spot that you can access with an open API, and you just have to get credentials to it, and then you can actually start to interrogate that service to get data back out. So it's not really delivered through a partner. It's literally just a connection to the cloud. So I'm not sure if that's the right spot for it, but that's where it seemed to fit here. And then I had to modify it because I told you guys even brought it up earlier today, security's got to be part of the stack. It just doesn't make sense to me without it. And again, just similar to the way that you guys talked about BMS, they do data and exchange, and they're the systems. I think today, in today's world, they also do the security, right? And a lot of the hacks or the breaches that you guys are talking about are when the BMS vendor is responsible for the security. And I'm not saying they weren't tied into IT, but they certainly weren't part of IT. IT might have had a firewall to block certain things, but there's a large part of that security that's handled by the BMS vendor, and ultimately then the controls contractor, and then ultimately, who knows, by somebody else, right? So I think that's a big part of the current stack. When we look at security going forward, and what we try to deliver in our stuff is really identity management. So, and it's not just me as Brian has an identity, it's also every single device has an identity. And so when you really get now into the systems start staying in their part of the stack. They don't start to span other things, right? These devices are just devices. They're intelligent. They have an identity though. And so these things need to know who they are. They need to be able to inform the network what they are. They need to inform the network what they're going to do, what they need, what other data they might need, what other types of devices they might want to communicate with, whether or not they even allow a human to interface with them, and if so, how, in what way, what ports, etc. I think all of that has to be there in the identity management and security layer. But then, of course, that goes all the way through, and it blocks everything. So you can't actually continue moving up the stack without having a fully fleshed out security platform. And then you get into, again, everything else that we've already talked about. So I just add that one security layer there. And then
I think Brian, you kind of said it there. Is it not more vertical between the systems, data exchange, apps, and delivery? It covers that whole smarts area as a vertical rather than a horizontal.
Well, because each one of these is a vertical, so yes, it's in the vertical stack, but each one is a vertical, remember? So the way that I applied it is that I could just deliver this section here. I don't have to deliver the full section. Or if I deliver everything we do, then I'm just delivering this column over on the right. And so yes, it's part of the vertical, but it's super early on in the vertical, right? So no device can talk to another device without being part of the security stack. And of course, this requires a lot of change in BMS systems, right? We're talking full IP at that point. We're talking a lot of change has to happen in our current environment. We're still putting in serial devices all over the place, and so that we really have to change. There's also a big move if we're going to use LoRaWAN and those things. How do you actually make that part of your security stack so that's managed effectively? I mean, there's lots of cool technology out there, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily fits holistically into a security model that can be well maintained and with any hole, right? Anything that you don't understand well as an organization ultimately creates vulnerability for you.
So Brian, before you get off, because I think picking up on security was great. I don't know that you meant to do this, but it feels like you've limited it to identity management as being the only topic of security. So you've got backups, which is sort of the recovery, restore aspects. So all these different software products need to be backed up properly. And you know that. And the question is, how is that getting done? And then from a protection standpoint, all these different software systems have bugs and they need to be upgraded. The antivirus needs to be put on generic servers and so on. So where would you see those things showing up in the stack?
So that's either apps or operations, in my opinion. I mean, those are things that are higher up, and of course, in order to actually execute those things, you have to have the authority to do so. So yeah, I would see those two higher up stack.
There was a bit of a discussion of security in some of our private calls, and one of the thinking is that security, as you've just identified, security is actually everywhere here, right? It's not just at that level. There's a specific level that you've identified there, but security applies for apps, any exchange or the data and everything else. So one way of actually dealing with security is to actually have a security slide, the same as what we were saying earlier, with different slides for different aspects of a
Well, yeah, and I think you could have a system slide too, right? So but when you're trying to look at overall, one of the things you said, Anto, at the beginning, or when you were just discussing this, is that you wanted to show, to be able to model out how things are changing so that you could prep for it, right? So this is perfect, because right here it shows security is handled by the BMS vendor most of the time, which is true. Yes. And it's one of the problems. So in my view, what you said actually supports breaking it out, because we're trying to identify that, hey, now security is a thing to itself. It's not, you don't farm it out to the BMS vendor, right?
But you would discover that if you created a security stack.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, this is how I did it. And then I changed it one more time, because you guys who've been around me a long time know I love the start with why concept. And so I really wanted to break this out. I was struggling with outcomes and value. And trying to figure out, is this an outcome or is it a value? And so I just said, well, if I'm asking that question of myself so many times, and my sales team, when I pitched it to them this morning, they were asking why too. And so I said, okay, I need to put it up there, right? And so, and I think this might help also with your delivery conversation. I'm not sure 100%, and these are just some sample wise of the kinds of conversations we might have with a client around these different things, and then of course the outcomes that contribute to those whys, and then of course the how you're going to do it. So it's this was our view, and how we, again, this is the first time I really tried to apply this smarter stack to our business, but it didn't take that long. So I think it does speak to the strength of the stack, because it didn't take long, even though I might have modified it a bit to tell the full story that I thought needed to be told. This is a pretty good way to illustrate. The last thing I'll say is physical. I just shrunk that up because, the building's there. Without a building, I don't have to worry about the stack. So I'm not sure it adds much value on the stack. So anyway, that's it.
One
Hey,
of the
Anto,
reasons, let me
I'm
just
sorry.
clarify that one point. And one of the reasons of having the physical there is that one of the ways we were using the different levels is different ways of procurement and different financial sort of ways you look at things. Physical things can be easily looked at as CapEx, whereas a lot of services, it's almost impossible. So that, and physical is definitely CapEx because of what it is. Just as a comment.
You don't think we're gonna have buildings as a service? It's funny, you mentioned that, Anto. If you look at, and I ride motorcycles, and so I've been following the electrification of motorcycles here recently, and I'm still pretty well convinced I don't need any motorcycle that goes 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. Because without a seatbelt, I'm not sure how you'd stay on. But the thing I noticed is there's one company out there now starting to do motorcycles as a service. So absolutely zero CapEx at all. You just basically sign up to lease it, and it comes with a cloud service and like AI, like Tesla. And when you're done with it, you turn it in and you can get a new one. So it's an interesting model. And I'm curious, if that plays well for motorcycles, how far up the expense chain does that really go? It's an interesting concept. Anyway, sorry.
It's cool. By the way, Volvo's doing that, a subscription model. They even pay the insurance and everything, and you just go turn it in.
Yeah.
But they don't pay the insurance. You pay the insurance through them.
Incorrect.
Gina.
Check it out.
Yeah, but you pay them to pay the insurance. So
Oh, I got that, but it's all one price.
Dina, you were going to say
Oh,
something.
I'm sorry. There were a couple of comments I just wanted to bring the attention to the panel. And one was Pete, who had a good comment. He said he wondered what a blank Smarter Stack page titled security would look like. I thought that was interesting. But there was one comment that said, directed towards Brian, is refrigeration covered under the company offering Stack Physical? I would say, yeah.
I think that's systems, right? So
Yeah, systems.
same,
Okay.
Rick Rolston talks a lot about sensors that are actually put in during construction that might monitor the hardness of the concrete or might monitor the structural integrity of the steel. Those are still systems as well, right? They're actual sensors designed to report on the status of a physical condition for sure, but they're still systems that we can get data from. So I think overall those fall into the monitoring and control systems.
Okay, great. And Anto, there's a few other questions on the Q&A and another one on the chat.
Yeah, I see that. The David Cass fault detection, not a function of operations. I don't know, that may have been before Brian came on.
Yeah, it was.
It was, yeah.
And also the comment about IAQ. So IAQ and other sort of things, Brian, you and I were chatting about things like sustainability, and which is obviously important. How would you map that onto the stack, if at
Yeah.
all?
So obviously the way that we have it on here is that the sensors are obviously in the systems. Then they have to climb up through security. A lot of these are point solutions, so they're out in the cloud. We have to bring that in. We bring it in through our product called IoT Jetstream, where we bring it in, we add it to the model, we add it to the digital twin. And then now we have that data as it relates to not only the building and the structure itself, but also all the other systems. So we know how it relates to HVAC, we know how it relates to the lighting, we know the noise levels and all of those different things in there now. And now we can ultimately compare that to the healthy buildings initiatives like well building, reset air, all of that. We can also either present that data to other ESG platforms. So I think overall, this ends up just flowing through automatically. We certainly could break out sustainability as its own slide, like you could security, but I think it is held within this architecture. It's just what sensors, what ultimately are you starting with at the sensor monitoring and control spot? And then how do you put it through? How do you make it part of your digital twin and relate it back to that building? And ultimately, not just the building, but the spaces, right? And so that's a big part of that digital twin, is knowing that I'm in my office, it's served by this VAV, that VAV is served by this air handler. This air handler has a certain amount of fresh air coming in. I've got my point solution, which is my indoor air quality sensor. It's got a lot of data that contributes to that. But like if I have formaldehyde problems, that might not be anything to do with my HVAC system. And so what are some other systems that might be in here that can help me relate and correspond that formaldehyde being high, right? So it's a matter of getting as much of that data normalized and so that you really understand its relationship to other data in the building. So I think it's part of this. And I think even if we made a healthy or a sustainability slide, we would still have all of these layers where we'd have the sensor, the security, the connectivity, the digital twin and how it relates to the rest of its environment that it's actually part of, and then ultimately what value it's going to deliver at the end. So I think it's part of this already.
Other thoughts or questions?
So Brian, it's Mark. Hey, how you doing? So here's my question is, so if we look at this, and again, this is your interpretation of an ideal one. Couldn't agree more with you. Well done, by the way. So my question then is, what do you look at digital twin? If the client, your customer says, I'm not interested in digital twin. What's your thinking about that, or something else? Pick 2 or 3 of these that may not be part of it, or the client hasn't bought in on it yet, or whatever. Yeah. What's your view about that? Is it all or nothing, or?
No. Well, so if they don't want digital twin, that's okay. From my perspective, I need the digital twin in order to deliver everything on the right. So if they said, I don't care about the digital twin, that's not an outcome I care about. It's really more about understanding the value they're looking for.
Right.
If they said, hey, on the flip side though, Mark, if they came in and said, hey, I just had a presentation by a competitor and they're talking about digital twin, what's your view on that? Now I can go back and show them where our view of what a digital twin really fits, right? And some people, the digital twin, the way they describe it, has a user experience, and it's walking through a 3D model of your floor plan, your building, whatever, maybe even working on your car, your chiller or whatever, and it's showing you the internal guts. And that's certainly one application of using the digital twin. But to me, the digital twin is much more at the data layer. That having the digital twin at the data layer empowers or enables all of those additional functionalities through some user experience or augmented reality or whatever you want to do once you have a digital twin. So I think, from our perspective, it's always there. And I think we could use all of those. So if somebody said, hey, I don't need your API, I don't care about it. Okay, great. It's there. If it's a value to you, fantastic. It's there to use. If it's not, it's okay. It's not required that you use it, right? It's just a matter of making sure that we understand why. When we understand why, we don't confuse them with all this other stuff, right?
I agree. Well said.
Which is why I guess you put the value in, because if the customer doesn't care, although you got the outcome there, you're actually providing him with value at the next level up, rather than something he actually needs to know about, i.e. the ontology and the digital twin.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our clients only know why.
Yeah.
They don't know what, and they don't know how. That's what they depend on us to do. Now, some of our clients know what, they don't know why. And we try to really make sure that they understand why. They come and ask us for a digital twin. Why? Well, because I heard about it at that awesome conference I was just at. That's not that won't force them to buy. It won't force them to be happy with the outcome, right? Their outcome has to be something that has to feed a why for their business. And if they end up having no why, then I always tell our people, our clients, anybody I talk to, you probably all have heard me say it before, you will never get finished, because nobody knows why you're there, which means they can't really define what you're supposed to do, which means it doesn't matter how long you're there, it's never going to get done. So it's really important to understand the why so that you can do all the rest of this stuff.
Brian, hey, Brian Lozano. So do you think in the context of what you just described, would the Smarter Stack help you in your discussions then with customers as you go through, do you think?
It's funny. So, hi, Anno. Yeah, absolutely. So I've created lots of slides. We have lots of ways to describe our business and present our business and to clients. And this morning when I just showed this at the end of our sales meeting, and all of our salespeople were like, immediately, can I have this? I want, this, because for them, a lot of our salespeople aren't the most techie people in the world.
Sure.
So some of the slides that I make are maybe a little too low level, where this seemed to be at the right level for all of our salespeople to feel like they could go deliver this to a client. And I particularly like, and I will point out what Anto said again, is it breaks up these things. This is what the BMS is in our traditional space. And here we're showing like how we think about the next generation of facilities management, right? And so,
right.
And depending on what layer you want to be with us, what kind of partner, what kind of customer you are with us, you might take one or more of these things. Like you don't have to do any kind of the stuff that we offer to augment your customer operations, but you can, right? And so those are the things that really start to resonate with our salespeople, which makes them more effective when they're communicating with the client.
This is
Good.
the point. This is a point, Brian, that vertical stack that you have, arguably that should reach all the way up to delivery because of the channel and branches are typically
right.
Channel. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
But no, I think that was a good confirmation, Anto, from Brian about, the part of the purpose of doing this is to have a common language format structure that to have to talk to people, because it's a complex space, right? And to Brian's point, the BMS guys, they wrap a lot of stuff in one box and it becomes confusing when you try to, compare and contrast with that.
Yeah, and that's, Brian, I think you brought some great value in terms of sort of bringing out security and that value layer at the top. I'd love to see how we can not have those and have those be included in the existing layers, because what you have in the values layer is in many cases what we would have put in the outcomes layer, because it's the outcome for the owner, which is the value proposition to the owner. Right? Whereas what you have in the outcomes is almost like technical outcomes or specific outcomes. So,
well, they're the what though. So if you really, and I would challenge you, because I'm like Simon Sinek nuthead, but if you actually go and look at why, the what, and the how as he breaks it out, you're going to find that it's something like this. Even to your movie example where you're delivering happiness, what's the why? The why is that you want to tell a story. That's why you're making movies. It's not to make people happy, because some of your stories aren't going to make people happy. So the what is those are the what's, right? But why you're doing it is something completely different than what. And so and the why is always what taps into your emotion, which is why we all make decisions. It's how we make decisions as humans. So I think it's really important to have that. Where you want to fit it in your stack, I think you need something. You don't have it in your stack today, and I think it would be a mistake to try to confuse why and what. I think
good point. Good point.
That's very good, Brian.
Fair point.
Right, we're at the top of the hour, so we're gonna wrap.
Okay. I really like the what, why, and how. I think that really adds to the stack. The other comment I would like to make is that I think we're moving in the right direction, because rather than Brian throwing the whole tool away and saying this is stupid, he's basically built on it, modified it, and I think that's the essence of a good tool. Is people use it. It's an early day tool, so it's naturally going to evolve. And watching how people use this tool, I think we're all going to learn. I've learned a whole bunch more about it by watching people trying to put their pieces into it. And I think that's an exercise. And somewhere we need to show all of the examples. I think that's the fastest way to learn how to use this tool, is to see how Brian used it, to see how Tracy used it. So that's my comment.
Okay, wonderful. So with that, we'll bring this to a wrap. Thank you very much, Brian. That was really great. Appreciate it, and appreciate the last minute putting together of everything.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Great.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks everybody for joining us. We will be back next week, and we'll continue this discussion. Meanwhile, video of this will be up by tomorrow morning. And have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.